The CEO walked briskly through the crowded marketplace, his eyes scanning the surroundings with the cold precision of a man who had seen it all. He had everything: wealth, power, and a reputation built from the ground up. But as he passed by the street vendors, something unusual caught his eye. A young boy no older than 6 or 7 sat in the corner with a battered, torn toy truck in his hands. It wasn't much, a simple, faded blue truck that had clearly seen better days. Yet, there was something about it that stopped the CEO in his tracks. The boy, dressed in ragged clothes, looked up at the man with eyes full of innocence. It wasn't just the toy that stood out. It was the boy's expression. There was a warmth in his gaze, despite the harsh world around him. The CEO felt a pang in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. The boy held out the truck toward him, his small hand trembling. "Mister, would you like to have my toy?" he asked, his voice soft yet filled with sincerity. The CEO's heart skipped a beat. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. This was a child with nothing but a broken toy, and yet he was willing to give it away selflessly. It was a moment so pure that it stunned the man. In that instant, the weight of his wealth, his success, and his achievements seemed to disappear. What did all of it mean if a boy like this was willing to part with the one thing he had left? The CEO knelt down, his mind racing. This boy had no idea who he was, no idea of the world he came from. Yet, in this small act of generosity, the CEO saw something he had lost: compassion, innocence, and the genuine spirit of giving. He took the toy from the boy's hand and looked into his eyes, his voice shaky for the first time in years. "Thank you," the CEO whispered. But this wasn't just any thank you. It was a thank you that resonated deeply in his heart. He wasn't just thanking the boy for the toy. He was thanking him for reminding him of something he had forgotten: the power of kindness, the importance of giving, and the true meaning of wealth. The boy's eyes, wide with innocence, sparkled in a way that made the CEO feel both deeply moved and profoundly uncomfortable. There was something about his untainted soul, his purity in a world filled with greed and power, that made everything the CEO had worked for seem trivial. The boy wasn't asking for anything in return. He wasn't aware of the CEO's fame or wealth. To him, the toy was just a simple object, something he had no real use for, yet he held onto it with so much care and pride. This small, unpretentious gesture of offering a broken toy made the CEO feel something he hadn't in a long time: guilt. In the boy's face, the CEO saw the rawness of life itself, untouched by the corruption and desire that so often clouded the judgment of adults. The boy's poverty was evident, but there was also a purity in his actions that spoke of a kind of love and selflessness that the CEO had long forgotten. He thought of his own life, how it had become a never-ending pursuit of more money, more success, more recognition, and he felt ashamed. This boy, with his only possession, had shown him something far more valuable than any material wealth: humility, compassion, and a pure heart that asked for nothing in return. As the CEO knelt beside the boy, he felt as though he was looking into a mirror of his own lost humanity. The innocence in the child's gesture wasn't just about giving away a toy, it was a symbol of something much larger. It was a reminder of a time when life was simpler, when people cared for each other without expecting anything back, when acts of kindness were pure and untainted by ulterior motives. The boy's gesture forced the CEO to confront the emptiness inside him. For all his accomplishments, for all the money he had amassed, he had lost the very thing that made life worth living: the ability to give, to care, and to love without reservation. The innocence of the boy was a stark contrast to the world the CEO had built for himself, a world where every action was calculated, every decision driven by the pursuit of profit. In the boy's simple gesture, the CEO saw everything he had sacrificed for success. The world had taught him to build walls, to protect his interests, and to be wary of others. Yet here was a child offering him his only possession without hesitation, without fear of betrayal. In that moment, the CEO realized how much he had lost, how much of his soul had been chipped away by the coldness of ambition. It was a painful realization. This child's innocence, his purity, forced the CEO to face the truth that his wealth had not made him happy. It had only filled the void with temporary distractions. The boy, with his simple toy and his kind heart, had shown him that the true treasures in life were not found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in human connection, generosity, and selflessness. And for the first time in years, the CEO felt the stirrings of something he had long forgotten: hope. As the CEO stood there holding the boy's broken toy in his hands, something began to shift within him. The weight of the toy, so small and insignificant in the eyes of the world, suddenly felt heavy with meaning. It wasn't just a piece of plastic and cloth. It represented something far deeper: the purity of selflessness, the innocence of a child who knew nothing of wealth, power, or status, and yet was able to give without hesitation. The toy was the key to a door the CEO hadn't noticed before, one that led to a world he had abandoned long ago, a world where compassion, kindness, and generosity were the true measures of success. The CEO had spent his life chasing after things that the world deemed valuable: wealth, status, recognition. But in that moment, as he looked at the boy's smiling face, he realized how hollow those pursuits had become. He had climbed the corporate ladder, amassed fortunes, and built an empire. But at what cost? What had he sacrificed along the way? Relationships, trust, happiness, love, things that no amount of money could buy. The boy's innocent gesture forced the CEO to confront his own selfishness, his own disconnect from the very values that once defined him as a person. The world had taught him that success was measured by the size of your bank account and the titles on your business card. It had taught him that the strong prevailed, that the smart profited, and that compassion was for the weak. But in the boy's eyes, in his simple and untainted actions, the CEO saw a different truth. The boy was rich, not in money, but in heart. He had something that the CEO had lost long ago: a deep, unshakable understanding of what truly mattered. The CEO realized that true success was not about how much you accumulated, but about how much you gave, how much you cared, and how much love you brought into the world. As he stood there, he could feel the coldness of his past life fading away. The boardroom battles, the cutthroat decisions, the sleepless nights, all of it seemed so trivial in comparison to the boy's unassuming act of kindness. The boy had nothing, yet he gave everything. The CEO, with all his riches, had so much, but was willing to give so little. In that stark contrast, the CEO began to question everything he thought he knew about the world. Was his wealth truly a measure of his worth? Was his success truly a reflection of his value as a human being? A wave of guilt washed over him, followed by a profound sense of regret. All these years, he had been chasing something that was never meant to be chased: the approval of others, the validation of his wealth, the illusion of success. But now, in the presence of this child, the CEO saw a different kind of success, a success born not from the mind, but from the heart. The boy's generosity, his ability to love without expecting anything in return, was a mirror that forced the CEO to see the cracks in his own character. For the first time in years, the CEO felt the stirrings of something powerful within him, a desire to be better, to do better, to live with meaning beyond the numbers on a ledger. It was a moral awakening. The boy's innocence was a wake-up call, a reminder that true fulfillment did not come from material success, but from the relationships we built, the love we gave, and the impact we had on others. The CEO knew that in this moment, everything had changed. He could no longer return to his old life, driven by greed and ambition. Something inside him had been reborn, a new purpose, a new understanding of what it truly meant to live a meaningful life. As the boy smiled up at him, oblivious to the deep transformation taking place, the CEO made a silent vow. He would change. He would spend the rest of his life making amends, living with intention, and using his resources not to further his own ambitions, but to uplift others, just as the boy had done for him. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was the only path that would lead him to the true success he had been searching for all along. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace, knowing that he had found the way. The CEO's heart skipped a beat as he watched the boy's face light up with joy, unaware of the storm brewing in the man's heart. He could feel a lump form in his throat as the boy, with innocent excitement, waited for a response. The toy, the broken, battered gift, was all he had to offer. Yet in that moment, it seemed like the most precious thing in the world. The CEO's eyes softened as he realized how small and insignificant his own achievements had seemed in comparison. The child had nothing but gave everything, asking for nothing in return. It was a stark contrast to the CEO's world of lavish parties, elite circles, and boardroom battles, where value was always measured by what you had and how much you could profit. In that moment, the rich businessman realized the emptiness of the life he had built. He had always believed that success came with power, wealth, and influence. But the boy, with his purity and untainted spirit, had shown him a different kind of success, a kind that didn't depend on status, but on kindness and generosity. The CEO's chest tightened as he looked at the boy again. The boy's clothes were ragged, his shoes worn out from walking the harsh streets, but his face shone with a light that was impossible to ignore. He was a shining beacon of love and selflessness, giving what he had with no thought of personal gain. It struck the CEO so deeply that he could almost feel the weight of every single moment of selfishness he had ever carried. All those times when he chose ambition over family, wealth over relationships, power over compassion, it had all led him to this point. And now he was face to face with someone who had nothing but still gave everything. The boy's eyes were filled with a deep, pure trust, as if expecting nothing but gratitude for his humble offering. The CEO could feel the shift in his own heart, a crack forming in the wall he had built around himself. His mind raced back to moments when he had been like the boy, before the world's harsh lessons had stolen his innocence. He remembered a time when his heart had been full of simple dreams, when kindness came naturally and he hadn't been afraid to help others. But somewhere along the way, ambition had clouded those dreams, and he had lost touch with that part of himself. Now, standing there, holding the broken toy, the CEO felt something he hadn't in years: guilt. It wasn't the guilt of losing money or missing a business opportunity. It was the guilt of realizing how far he had strayed from the person he once was. He felt ashamed of his selfishness, his arrogance, and his constant need to prove his worth to the world. He had never paused to think about what truly mattered, what it meant to give, to love, to care, without expecting anything in return. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at the boy, his heart opening in ways it had not in a long time. The CEO was overwhelmed by the child's purity, his innocence, his ability to give without hesitation. It felt like a mirror to his soul, reflecting everything he had lost. In that simple act of giving, a toy that was broken yet filled with love, the CEO was confronted with his own humanity, his own vulnerability. He realized how much he had taken for granted, the love he had pushed away, the kindness he had ignored, and the joy he had forgotten in his pursuit of wealth and success. The boy's gesture was not just a moment of giving, it was a catalyst for the CEO to reconnect with his own heart, his own values. The CEO suddenly saw his own life as a tapestry of choices, and for the first time, he felt the urge to undo the damage. He wanted to be better, to be more like the boy, selfless, kind, giving. He could feel the tears threatening to fall as a surge of emotion overwhelmed him. His heart, once closed off, now felt like it was breaking open, and in that moment, he made a promise to himself. No matter what happened next, he would change. He would no longer live for himself, but for others. The boy's gift, the broken toy, had given him something priceless: the courage to look inward, to face the person he had become, and to take responsibility for the choices he had made. It was a turning point, a moment that would define the rest of his life. The tears that filled his eyes were not tears of regret, but of awakening. The CEO knew that from that moment on, he would strive to be a man worthy of the boy's selfless gift, to live with purpose, kindness, and a heart open to others. As the days passed, the CEO couldn't stop thinking about the boy, the way his face had lit up when he gave him his only toy, and the way he had left, disappearing into the shadows of the city, his footsteps silent as the world around him continued its relentless march. The boy had given everything without a second thought, and yet there was something deeper in that simple act of kindness. It was more than just an offering. It was a silent sacrifice, an exchange that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The CEO began to realize that the boy's life in many ways mirrored his own. The boy had nothing, yet he had given all he had without hesitation. It was a sacrifice born out of necessity, yes, but also out of a pure and innocent sense of love. The boy had no toys, no money, no status. He had only his heart and his willingness to share it. In his innocence, he had unknowingly taught the CEO a lesson about what true sacrifice really was. It wasn't about giving away material possessions or wealth. It was about giving of oneself, pouring your heart and soul into something with no expectation of reward. The boy's sacrifice wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't accompanied by a speech or a grand gesture. It was a quiet offering, a moment in time that seemed so small in the grand scheme of things. But to the CEO, it was a powerful reminder of what it meant to give without strings attached. The boy had asked for nothing in return, yet the CEO could feel the weight of the boy's gift in a way he never had before. It was a reminder that the greatest sacrifices were often the most silent ones, the ones made out of pure love, without the need for recognition or reward. As the CEO reflected on the boy's sacrifice, he found himself questioning the choices he had made throughout his life. He had built an empire, accumulated wealth, and surrounded himself with people who praised him for his success. But all of that had come at a cost, the cost of losing sight of the simple, selfless acts that truly made a difference in the world. He had been so focused on achieving more, on accumulating wealth and power, that he had forgotten the importance of quiet sacrifices, the kind that changed lives without fanfare. The boy's sacrifice had shown him that giving didn't always require grand gestures. It didn't need to be a flashy donation or a public display of wealth. Sometimes, the most meaningful acts of kindness were the quiet, unnoticed ones, like a boy giving his only toy to someone who needed it more. It was a reminder that the true value of a gift lay not in its size or its material worth, but in the love and intention behind it. The boy had given his toy because he wanted to help, because he cared, and that was what made his sacrifice so powerful. The CEO's heart was heavy as he thought about how little he had truly given in his own life. He had spent so much time taking, accumulating, and building. But how much had he given? How many people had he helped without expecting anything in return? How many silent sacrifices had he made for others? The boy had unknowingly opened his eyes to a truth he had long overlooked. The greatest gift was often the one that cost the giver the most, not in material wealth, but in selflessness and love. The CEO's world had always been about competition, about winning at all costs. But the boy had shown him a different path, one that didn't involve outshining others or proving your worth. Instead, it was about quietly giving, without the need for recognition or reward. The CEO began to realize that true success wasn't measured by how much you accumulated, but by how much you gave. And it wasn't about giving to show off, to earn praise, or to gain something in return. It was about giving because it was the right thing to do, because you wanted to make the world a better place, even in the smallest of ways. The boy's silent sacrifice had planted a seed in the CEO's heart. It was a seed that slowly began to grow, shifting his perspective on life and what it meant to truly live. He knew that the boy's act of kindness would forever be etched in his memory, a reminder of the power of silent sacrifices. And as the days went on, the CEO found himself making small changes, offering a helping hand when he could, showing kindness to those who needed it, and giving without expecting anything in return. He realized that the more he gave, the more his heart expanded, and the more he connected with the world around him. The moment the CEO learned where the boy lived, a collapsing shack at the edge of the city dump, something shifted inside him. No longer was he just grateful. He was angry. Angry that a child with so much heart, who had given so selflessly, had to survive in such unforgiving conditions. That spark of gratitude turned into a fire of protection. And in that fire, his resolve hardened. The world might have ignored that boy, but he wouldn't. Not anymore. He drove there himself, against the advice of his security team, walking through filth and broken glass in a tailored suit. But the smell, the stares, none of it mattered. All he could see was that boy, asleep in the cold, curled up on a broken mattress with nothing but hope in his heart. That image carved itself into the CEO's soul, and in that moment, he made a silent vow. No one would ever hurt this child again, not while he was breathing. He started moving mountains, fast. He didn't wait for board meetings or legal paperwork. He bought the land surrounding the dump, funded shelters, hired private educators, and ordered a private medical team for the boy's health. His assistants scrambled, his team questioned him, but he didn't stop. This wasn't business. This was personal. His every move screamed, "This child matters." And he wouldn't rest until the boy was safe, not just temporarily, but forever. When journalists came sniffing, the CEO didn't give interviews. This wasn't about good press. He protected the boy's identity like a vault, shielding him from any exploitation. In meetings, he looked executives dead in the eye and said, "If it's between your profit and his safety, I'll burn the profit to the ground." The softness he had once buried under years of corporate power had returned, but now it was wrapped in steel. He wasn't just helping the boy, he was fighting for him, even when the boy hesitated, scared of the new life. Unsure of his place in this foreign world of marble floors and fresh sheets, the CEO knelt beside him. He told him, "You're not alone. Not anymore. I've got you." That sentence wasn't just words. It was a promise, a shield. The CEO became a wall between the boy and the cruelty of the world, and through every step, his mood never wavered. He was protective like a guardian, and determined like a man who had been saved and now owed his life in return. The CEO had always prided himself on being efficient, ruthless when needed, and laser-focused on results. But that night, after tucking the boy into a real bed for the first time in his life, he sat alone in the mansion's library, staring at an untouched glass of scotch. And something inside him cracked. He saw the ghost of who he used to be. A man who walked past beggars without blinking. A man who silenced emotions with power. And for the first time in decades, he regretted it all. He remembered the boardroom, laughs at charity cases, the deals made without caring who got crushed beneath them. He thought about the old man he'd ignored outside his first office, the waitress he never tipped, the intern he humiliated just to prove a point. These memories surged back with venom, and the boy's innocent eyes, full of gratitude for a toy, stabbed through his pride like a blade. He whispered into the silence, "I was wrong. All of it. Wrong." And that realization didn't fade. It ignited action. The CEO didn't just throw money at causes now, he showed up. He gave speeches to corporate crowds about humanity. He walked into his empire's darkest corners. Factories where workers were exploited, offices where promotions were bought with silence, and cleaned house. Executives were fired. Systems were rebuilt. His redemption wasn't just about doing good, it was about undoing the damage he'd once ignored. But the real redemption happened in moments no one saw. When he personally read the boy bedtime stories. When he sat at community centers in ragged jeans, learning names and holding hands. When he cried, not for sympathy, but because the weight of his past had become a fuel for a better present. He didn't just want forgiveness from the world. He wanted to earn it, every single day. And that desire turned into a quiet revolution within him. Eventually, the public noticed, not because he flaunted it, but because the change was undeniable. The cold, calculating CEO was gone. In his place stood a man who had found purpose in pain, clarity through a child's gift, and redemption not in headlines, but in human connection. He wasn't just rebuilding the boy's life, he was rebuilding his own, brick by brick, mistake by mistake, heartbeat by heartbeat. The city's morning buzz carried on like any other day, but deep in the heart of the CEO's tower, something extraordinary was unfolding, hidden from headlines, unseen by cameras. The boy, now a little stronger, stood in front of an auditorium packed with executives, community leaders, and press. He clutched a piece of paper in his small hands, his voice trembling as he whispered to the CEO, "What if they laugh?" The CEO bent down, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "Let them. But speak anyway. Your truth is bigger than their doubt." No one expected what came next. As the boy walked to the podium, there was a tense silence, a collective skepticism. In the room, cameras clicked, pens paused. The world waited to see what this tiny figure, in an oversized suit donated by the CEO himself, could possibly say that mattered. Then, with a soft, shaking voice, he told them how he had found the CEO in the alley. How he didn't know who he was, only that he needed help. "I gave him my toy because I thought he looked sad," he said. "I didn't know it would change everything." tears welled in the eyes of some of the most hardened business tycoons. He spoke not just of charity, but of being seen, of being valued. He described nights on cold streets, his mother whispering stories of castles and kindness just to help him sleep. "She said one day a good person would find us," he whispered. "I didn't think that person would be the one everyone calls cold." The room shifted. The CEO in the back stood frozen. For the first time, he wasn't the center. The boy was. And in his raw innocence, he turned doubt into faith and fear into inspiration. Then came the surprise. The boy pulled out a tiny hand-drawn blueprint from his pocket. His dream. A safe place where no child ever feels invisible again. And in front of everyone, the CEO stepped forward, took the paper, and announced the launch of the Lighthouse Foundation, an initiative to build shelters across the country, led by the boy's vision. The crowd erupted. Journalists rushed to cover it, not because of its scale, but because of its soul. The moment didn't just change the boy's life, it shifted the entire narrative of what leadership meant. The auditorium had long emptied, but its echoes remained. Whispers of transformation and belief stirred in every seat, on every wall. Outside, cameras had stopped flashing, reporters had closed their notebooks, and the world had moved on. But inside that moment, something unshakable had been born. Not in a press release or financial statement, but in the soft, unwavering bond between a homeless child and the man the world once feared. The CEO sat alone now in the quiet of his office, the boy curled up asleep on the couch nearby. Papers, blueprints, letters from children across the country now flooded his desk. Kids who had seen themselves in that small boy's story and finally believed they mattered too. The man who once measured worth in market shares now measured it in moments, in heartbeats, in lives touched. He looked out over the city, not from a place of power, but from a place of responsibility. He remembered when his tower was built to rise above people. Now, it existed to lift them. The boy, still sleeping, murmured something, soft and sweet, like a dream he didn't want to wake from. And in that moment, the CEO made a decision. He wouldn't just support the Lighthouse Foundation with money. He would be its first full-time volunteer, because what began as an act of charity had become a calling. His redemption wasn't about wiping away his past mistakes. It was about honoring the gift he had been given, a second chance. Soon, shelters began to rise. Not as cold institutions, but as warm, colorful havens built from the boy's vision. Libraries instead of fences, beds with names etched into the headboards, artwork drawn by the children who lived there. They were homes, not just shelters. Each one lit by a symbol of hope, a small sculpture of a toy car at its entrance, reminding every child who walked in that someone once gave everything he had, and it changed the world. The boy's mother, once thought lost, was found, thanks to the Foundation's efforts. Their reunion, tearful and trembling, reminded everyone watching that some stories don't need money or fame to be epic. They just need faith and someone willing to see the invisible. The CEO's board of directors changed too. Men and women once obsessed with profit now followed his lead, investing in communities, building schools, launching mentorship programs. What began with one boy's kindness turned an empire of steel into an engine of compassion. And that boy? He grew up in the warmth of purpose. He didn't just become the symbol of the foundation, he became its leader. A voice for children everywhere who were once dismissed, ignored, or left behind. He never forgot the alley, the hunger, the hurt, but he turned it all into strength, into empathy, into a roadmap for others who still walked those same cold streets. Years later, in an interview watched by millions, he was asked, "What would you say to your younger self, the one who had nothing but a toy car and a little bit of hope?" He smiled softly and answered, "I'd say thank you, because you didn't give up, and because you believed in someone the world said was too far gone." And as the camera panned out, behind him stood the CEO, older now, slower but eyes still, burning with purpose. Together they stood not as a billionaire and a homeless kid, but as a family born of kindness, a bond built on sacrifice, belief, and the willingness to change. That story, told on stages and in books, echoed through generations. It taught that no act of kindness is too small, that the greatest gifts come from the most unlikely hands. And that hope, real hope, isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, persistent, carried in the heart of a child who dared to give everything he had to a man the world had forgotten. And that hope, it lit the world.